Hey everyone, don't forget to comment where you're watching from today. What you're about to witness is a story about how a first-class flight became a lesson in humility and how a businessman's arrogance led to one of the most embarrassing moments of his life. The Los Angeles International Airport's first-class lounge hummed with the quiet energy of privilege and power. Outside, a setting sun painted the runway in shades of gold, while inside, travelers in designer suits tapped away on laptops and sipped premium cocktails. Among them, Tristan Vaughn adjusted his Rolex watch, his newly promoted position as Vice President of West Coast Operations sitting as comfortably on his shoulders as his tailored Armani suit. What Tristan didn't know as he prepared to board his flight to New York was that his carefully constructed world of status and superiority was about to collide with someone who had nothing to prove to anyone. Someone whose presence would turn this routine first-class flight into a story that would spread across social media within hours. Aria Cruz had been working first-class cabins long enough to recognize the different types of passengers who came through. There were the quiet professionals, the celebrated athletes, the occasional celebrities who just wanted to be left alone, and then there were people like Tristan Vaughn, those who seemed to think their ticket price included the right to look down on others. The boarding process was proceeding normally when Bruce Willis walked into the terminal. He was dressed casually in jeans and a worn leather jacket, a baseball cap pulled low over his eyes. No entourage, no fanfare, just a man making his way to his seat like any other traveler. Eleanor Payne, Bruce's assistant, had deliberately booked him on this later flight, knowing it would be less crowded, less likely to draw attention. After decades in the spotlight, Bruce preferred these quieter moments, the simple pleasure of traveling without the weight of celebrity. Captain Gabriel Stone, a veteran pilot who had seen his share of first-class drama over the years, noticed Bruce during the pre-flight checks. He'd flown enough celebrities to know that the truly great ones were often the most unassuming. Tristan Vaughn was already settled in his seat 2A when he noticed someone in casual attire approaching the first-class cabin. His lip curled slightly as he watched Bruce store a small bag in the overhead compartment. In Tristan's world, first class had a dress code, even if it wasn't officially stated. "Excuse me," Tristan called out, his voice carrying that particular tone of someone used to having their opinions heard. "I believe you might have wandered into the wrong cabin. Economy is further back." A few other passengers looked up, some with embarrassment at Tristan's behavior, others with growing recognition as they realized who he was addressing. Bruce simply continued arranging his bag, his movements unhurried and deliberate. "Sir," Tristan continued, louder now, enjoying what he assumed was his role in maintaining the standards of first-class travel, "the dress code here is somewhat more elevated. Perhaps you'd be more comfortable in another section." Aria Cruz, who had been preparing the pre-flight service, felt her professional smile freeze in place. In her 5 years of working first class, she had seen her share of entitled behavior, but this was approaching a new level. Bruce finally turned, his expression calm and unruffled. Without a word, he took his assigned seat 2B, right next to Tristan. The businessman's face tightened with displeasure at the prospect of spending the flight next to someone he deemed so clearly out of place. "You know," Tristan said, his voice dripping with condescension, "there's a certain expectation in first class. It's not just about having the money for a ticket. It's about maintaining an appropriate appearance, a certain standard." Other passengers were now openly watching the interaction. A woman in 3A had her phone discreetly aimed in their direction, while a businessman across the aisle seemed to be struggling to contain his amusement. Eleanor Payne, seated a few rows back, started to move forward, but Bruce caught her eye and gave a subtle shake of his head. He had handled far worse than an arrogant businessman in his decades-long career. "I mean really," Tristan continued, warming to his theme, "it's about respect for your fellow passengers. We pay a premium for a premium experience. That includes not having to sit next to someone who looks like they just walked in off the street." Bruce adjusted his seat slightly, his movements measured and calm. His silence seemed to irritate Tristan even more than any response might have. "Perhaps," Tristan said, pulling out his phone, "I should have a word with the flight attendant. Or better yet, the airline's customer service. I'm sure they'd be interested to know that their first-class standards are slipping." Aria Cruz was already moving toward them, her professional training warring with her growing desire to put this pompous passenger in his place. But before she could reach them, Captain Stone's voice came over the intercom, changed everything. "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome aboard. This is your captain speaking. Before we begin our safety briefing, I'd like to extend a special welcome to one of America's most beloved actors, who honors us with his presence today. Mr. Bruce Willis, thank you for choosing to fly with us." The silence that followed was absolute. Tristan Vaughn's face went through a remarkable series of transformations as the reality of his situation dawned on him. The man he had been insulting, the passenger he had deemed unworthy of first class, was one of Hollywood's biggest stars. And there you have it, friends. Sometimes the biggest statements are made without saying a word. Have you ever witnessed someone's arrogance lead to their own embarrassment? Share your stories in the comments below. Stay tuned, because what happens next will remind us all that true class has nothing to do with what you're wearing or how much you paid for your ticket. It's about how you treat others, especially when you think no one important is watching. The moments following Captain Stone's announcement created the kind of silence that seems to have physical weight. Tristan Vaughn's face had drained of color, his earlier confidence evaporating like morning dew under a harsh sun. But it was Bruce Willis's continued calm that truly commanded the cabin's attention. Aria Cruz moved smoothly into the moment, her professional training taking over. "Mr. Willis, would you like your usual sparkling water before takeoff?" she asked, her voice carrying just enough volume to confirm for any remaining doubters that yes, this was indeed the action star that Tristan had been condescending to. Eleanor Payne watched from her seat, fighting back a smile. She had seen situations like this before, people making assumptions about Bruce based on his casual appearance, his preference for staying under the radar. It usually ended with them learning a valuable lesson about judging books by their covers. The other first-class passengers were now openly staring at Tristan, their expressions ranging from second-hand embarrassment to barely concealed amusement. The woman who had been filming earlier quickly tucked her phone away, but not before capturing the perfect moment of realization on the businessman's face. I had no idea," Tristan stammered, his carefully cultivated executive presence crumbling. "Mr. Willis, I must apologize. If I had known dash." Bruce turned to him then, his expression neither angry nor mocking, but carrying the weight of someone who had seen this scene play out before. "That's the problem, isn't it?" he said quietly. "You shouldn't need to know who someone is to treat them with respect." The words, spoken without heat but with undeniable impact, seemed to hang in the air. A few passengers nodded in agreement, while others shifted uncomfortably, perhaps recognizing times they had made similar judgments. Captain Stone's voice came over the intercom again, this time for the standard pre-flight announcements. But there was a warmth in his tone that suggested he was well aware of what had just transpired in first class. "Ladies and gentlemen, we're about to begin our journey to New York. Remember, on this aircraft, we believe every passenger deserves to be treated with courtesy and respect, regardless of what they're wearing." Tristan's discomfort was palpable as the flight attendants began their safety demonstration. He kept shooting sidelong glances at Bruce, clearly trying to figure out how to recover from his monumental faux pas. His phone, which he had so confidently wielded earlier to threaten a complaint, now sat untouched in his pocket. A young flight attendant, Nova Sky, approached with the pre-flight drink service. She had been warned about Tristan's earlier behavior by Aria, and now took particular pleasure in addressing Bruce with the warmth and respect he had shown to every crew member. "Mr. Willis," she said, "Captain Stone wanted you to know that he loved your performance in Die Hard. He says it's a Christmas tradition in his family." The subtle reminder of Bruce's iconic status made Tristan sink even lower in his seat. As the plane began its taxi to the runway, other passengers started sharing quiet conversations about their favorite Bruce Willis movies. Each mention seemed to be another nail in the coffin of Tristan's superiority complex. "You know," Bruce said suddenly, addressing Tristan but speaking loud enough for nearby passengers to hear, "I learned something important early in my career. The costume department on my first TV show taught me that what someone wears doesn't define them. It's how they carry themselves, how they treat others, that's what matters." The lesson wasn't lost on anyone in the cabin. Tristan, in his expensive suit and designer accessories, had revealed himself to be anything but classy, while Bruce, in his casual attire, exuded nothing but genuine class. Eleanor caught snippets of conversations from other passengers. "Can you believe that guy tried to throw Bruce Willis out of first class? I heard he even threatened to complain to customer service." The story was already taking on a life of its own. As the plane reached cruising altitude, Arya began the proper drink service. When she reached Bruce and Tristan's row, she handled the situation with perfect professional grace. "Mr. Willis, your sparkling water. And for you, Mr. Vaughn?" The contrast between her warm tone with Bruce and her coolly professional address to Tristan was subtle but unmistakable. Just water," Tristan managed, his earlier demands for premium champagne forgotten in his embarrassment. A well-dressed woman across the aisle leaned over to Bruce. "Mr. Willis, I just wanted to say, my father was a janitor who occasionally got to fly first class for medical treatments. He used to talk about people like him." She nodded toward Tristan, who made him feel like he didn't belong. "Thank you for showing that true class isn't about what you wear." Bruce's response was characteristic of the man who had built his career playing everyday heroes. "Your father sounds like someone who understood real value. Sometimes the most important people are the ones others don't notice." The irony wasn't lost on anyone. Tristan, who had tried so hard to be noticed, to be seen as superior, had only succeeded in highlighting his own lack of genuine class. Meanwhile, Bruce, who had sought no attention, commanded natural respect through his simple dignity. Captain Stone made another announcement, this time about some light turbulence ahead. But he ended it with a personal touch. "And Mr. Willis, my daughter wanted me to tell you that Look Who's Talking is her favorite movie. She says it showed her that tough guys can have soft hearts." This personal detail, this reminder that Bruce Willis was not just an action star but an actor with depth and range, seemed to particularly affect Tristan. Here was a man who had played everything from hardened cops to gentle fathers, who had earned his success through talent and hard work, not through putting others down. A flight attendant from economy class found an excuse to pass through first class, barely containing her excitement at seeing Bruce Willis. What struck everyone was how he treated her with the same quiet respect he showed to everyone else, a sharp contrast to Tristan's earlier behavior. "I've been in this business for 30 years, Bruce said, seemingly to no one in particular. "Started as a bartender, worked my way up. Never forgot what it was like to be the person others looked down on. Maybe that's why I enjoy playing characters who prove first impressions wrong." The message wasn't subtle, but it didn't need to be. Tristan's face showed that he was processing not just his embarrassment, but perhaps a deeper realization about his own behavior. Eleanor watched as her boss handled the situation with his characteristic grace. She had seen him deal with far worse: paparazzi, aggressive fans, critics, always maintaining that same unflappable dignity. This was just another moment where his true character showed through. "Sir," Tristan finally said, his voice much quieter than before, "I truly apologize. Not just for not recognizing you, but for everything else. I was wrong." Bruce's response was simple but powerful. "Don't apologize for not recognizing me. Apologize for thinking it would matter. The right way to treat people doesn't change based on who they turn out to be." The lesson seemed to ripple through the first-class cabin. Several passengers were discreetly taking notes on their phones, perhaps recognizing a wisdom that went beyond this single incident. And there you have it, friends. Sometimes life's most important lessons come at 35,000 feet, delivered not through words alone, but through the quiet dignity of someone who has nothing to prove. Have you ever witnessed a moment where someone's true character was revealed? Share your stories in the comments below. Stay tuned, because this flight is about to teach Tristan Vaughn, and all of us, an even deeper lesson about judgment, respect, and the true meaning of class. What happened next during that flight from Los Angeles to New York would prove that sometimes the most profound lessons come wrapped in unexpected packages. As the plane cruised at 35,000 feet, the story that had begun with an arrogant businessman's mistake was about to take a turn that no one, not even Bruce Willis himself, could have anticipated. Arya Cruz was serving dinner when she noticed something unusual about Tristan Vaughn's hands. They were shaking slightly as he tried to unfold his tray table. The man who had earlier exuded nothing but arrogant confidence now seemed to be struggling with something beyond mere embarrassment. Bruce noticed too. Years of observing people for his roles had given him an eye for subtle details, and something about Tristan's demeanor had shifted from simple humiliation to what appeared to be genuine distress. "You're not just having a bad day, are you?" Bruce asked quietly, his voice pitched so only Tristan could hear. The businessman startled, nearly spilling his water. Eleanor Payne, watching from her seat, saw her boss's expression change, the same look he got when he found something genuine beneath a superficial scene, the actor's instinct for real human drama. Tristan began, then stopped, seeming to wage an internal battle. "No, I'm not. This was supposed to be my triumphant flight home. Just made vice president, biggest promotion of my career. But 20 minutes before boarding, I got a call from my sister." Captain Stone's voice came over the intercom, announcing they were heading into some light turbulence. The brief interruption gave Tristan a moment to collect himself, but when he continued, his carefully constructed facade had cracked completely. "My nephew, Tommy, he's 6. They just diagnosed him with a rare condition. The best specialists are in New York, but the treatment costs." He trailed off, his earlier bravado revealed as a mask for deeper fears. Bruce listened quietly, the same focused attention he brought to his most serious roles now directed at the man who had tried to humiliate him earlier. "The promotion was supposed to solve everything," Tristan continued, his voice barely a whisper. "Better insurance, better pay. But I just found out it won't cover experimental treatments. I was on the phone with the insurance company right before boarding. That's why." He gestured vaguely at himself, at the expensive suit that now seemed more like armor than attire. Nova Sky approached with fresh drinks, noticed the changed atmosphere between the two men. She'd seen enough in-flight dramas to recognize when something significant was happening beneath the surface. "Sometimes," Bruce said after a thoughtful pause, "we wear our fear as anger, our helplessness as arrogance. Doesn't make it right, but it makes it human." The wisdom of those words seemed to hang in the air as the plane pushed through another patch of turbulence. Other passengers had returned to their movies or laptops, the earlier drama forgotten, unaware of the deeper story unfolding in row 2. Eleanor watched as Bruce pulled out his phone, sent a quick text, then turned back to Tristan. "Tell me about Tommy," he said simply. What followed was a conversation that transformed the remainder of the flight. Tristan spoke about his nephew's love for superheroes, especially John McClane from Die Hard, the irony of which wasn't lost on anyone involved. He described a bright, brave kid who kept smiling through doctor's appointments and tests, who still believed in happy endings. "He watches Die Hard with his father, my brother, every Christmas," Tristan explained, laughing despite himself. "Well, the edited version. He says he wants to be brave like John McClane." Bruce's next words carried the weight of decades in an industry he'd never let define him. "You know what makes John McClane brave? It's not the stunts or the shooting. It's that he keeps going, keeps fighting for what matters, even when everything seems impossible." Arya, passing by with coffee service, overheard Bruce sharing stories about making Die Hard, about how the character of John McClane was shaped to be an everyday hero, someone who wasn't special because of his abilities, but because of his determination to help others. Captain Stone's voice came over the intercom again, this time with an update about their arrival time in New York. But he added something unusual, and for our passengers interested in heroes, remember that real ones don't always wear capes or expensive suits. Sometimes they just show up when they're needed most. The message seemed pointed, though only a few people in the cabin understood its full significance. Tristan's face showed a mix of emotions, embarrassment at his earlier behavior, worry about his nephew, and something else, something like hope. "Mr. Willis," he said finally, "I owe you more than one apology. Not just for my behavior, but for being so caught up in my own fears that I took them out on others." Bruce's response was characteristic of the man who had built a career playing complex characters. Fear makes us do strange things. The trick is recognizing it, then finding a better way to face it. Eleanor's phone buzzed with confirmation messages. Bruce's earlier text had set several things in motion. She smiled, knowing that while her boss preferred to avoid publicity, he never hesitated to use his connections when they could genuinely help someone. As the plane began its descent into New York, Bruce handed Tristan a business card. "There's a specialist at Mount Sinai," he said quietly. "Best in the field. She's expecting your call tomorrow morning." Sometimes experimental treatments find funding from unexpected sources. Tristan stared at the card, his hands trembling again, but for entirely different reasons. "I don't deserve this," he whispered. "After how I treated you." "This isn't about you," Bruce replied simply. "It's about Tommy. About making sure a brave kid gets to keep watching hero movies with his dad at Christmas." The New York skyline was becoming visible through the windows, the city lights twinkling like stars brought down to earth. In row 2, two men who had started the flight as adversaries now sat in companionable silence, both changed by revelations neither had expected. Nova Sky, preparing the cabin for landing, overheard Bruce's final words to Tristan. "Real class isn't about how you treat people who can help you. It's about how you help people who can't do anything for you in return." And there you have it, friends. Sometimes what looks like a simple story about arrogance and humility turns out to be about something much deeper, about fear and hope, about the masks we wear when we're scared, and about how true heroes don't just exist in movies. Have you ever discovered that someone's unkindness was really a mask for their own pain? Have you ever been humbled by receiving kindness you didn't think you deserved? Share your stories in the comments below. Stay tuned, because this tale of a first-class confrontation turned life-changing encounter isn't over yet. Sometimes the most important journeys aren't measured in miles, but in the distance between who we pretend to be and who we could become. 1 year after that memorable flight from Los Angeles to New York, the Mount Sinai Pediatric Ward was hosting a special Christmas screening of Die Hard. In the front row, 6-year-old Tommy sat beaming, his treatment successful, his energy restored, watching his favorite movie with an audience he never expected to have. Tristan Vaughn stood at the back of the room, his expensive suit replaced by casual clothes, watching his nephew point excitedly at the screen. The past year had changed him in ways that went far beyond his choice of attire. The man who had once judged others by their appearance now ran a foundation helping families access experimental medical treatments. Bruce Willis sat quietly in the corner, having slipped in without fanfare just as the movie started. Eleanor Payne watched her boss's face as he observed not the film he'd made decades ago, but the joy it brought to a child who had fought his own battles with McClane-like determination. Aria Cruz, who had transferred to New York routes specifically to follow up on the story, had arranged her schedule to be present. She remembered every detail of that flight, how a moment of arrogance had transformed into something profound and life-changing. "You know," Tristan said softly to Bruce, "Tommy doesn't know about that flight. About how I treated you, about how you helped us anyway. I've been trying to figure out how to tell him, how to explain that the person who helped save his life was someone I'd disrespected." Bruce's response carried the wisdom of someone who had seen both the best and worst of human nature. Some stories are better left as lessons learned than tales told. What matters is what you do with those lessons. Captain Gabriel Stone, who had been following Tommy's story through updates from Aria, had arranged his schedule to be present as well. The pilot who had first announced Bruce's presence on that fateful flight now watched as life came full circle in the most meaningful way. The foundation Tristan had established, inspired by Bruce's quiet act of kindness, had already helped 12 families access treatments they couldn't otherwise afford. Each success story was a reminder of how a moment of humility could lead to a lifetime of purpose. Nova Sky, who had witnessed the transformation begin during that flight, was now involved in the foundation's work, helping coordinate travel arrangements for families needing to reach specialized treatment centers. She often thought about how one flight had changed so many lives. Tommy's doctors had been amazed by his progress. The experimental treatment, funded through connections Bruce had quietly arranged, had proven more successful than anyone dared hope. But what had truly helped the boy fight through the hardest days was his determination to be brave like John McClane. "Sometimes," Bruce said, watching Tommy cheer at a particularly exciting scene, our movies touch people in ways we never expected. But it's what people do with that inspiration that really matters. Tristan nodded, remembering how his nephew's love for Die Hard had become a source of strength during treatment. The doctors had even started calling him Little McLean for his resilience, his refusal to give up no matter how tough things got. The screening room was filled with other young patients and their families, all beneficiaries of the Foundation's work. Each had their own story of facing impossible odds, of finding hope when it seemed lost, of discovering that heroes exist both on screen and in real life. Eleanor watched as Bruce interacted with the children after the movie, showing the same quiet respect to each one that he'd shown on that flight a year ago. No fanfare, no celebrity attitude, just genuine connection with young fighters who saw in John McClane a reflection of their own courage. "Mr. Willis," Tommy said when Bruce knelt down to chat with him, "Uncle Tristan says you're the reason I got better. But I think it's because John McClane helped me be brave." The irony of this statement brought tears to Tristan's eyes, knowing the full story that his nephew didn't. Bruce's response was perfect. "You know what makes John McClane special? It's not that he's stronger or tougher than anyone else. It's that he never stops trying to help others, even when it's hard." Sounds like you've got that part figured out already. The Foundation's next project was already in motion, a program to provide entertainment systems for children's hospital wards, loaded with movies that inspired hope and courage. Each system would include, of course, a carefully edited version of Die Hard. "I keep thinking about that flight," Tristan admitted to Bruce later. "How differently it could have gone if you'd reacted to my behavior the way I deserved. How many families wouldn't have been helped if you just put me in my place and left it at that?" Bruce's wisdom showed in his response. Life gives us chances to be better than our mistakes. What matters is recognizing those chances when they come. Captain Stone, who had been invited to the screening by Arya, shared his own perspective. "In all my years of flying, I've seen countless first-class dramas. But this is the first one that turned into a mission to help others." The impact had rippled beyond just Tommy's case. Other celebrities had gotten involved with the Foundation, inspired by how Bruce had turned a potential public relations incident into a private mission of helping others. The story of what had happened on that flight had spread, though few knew the full details. Arya had seen many changes in Tristan over the past year. The arrogant businessman who had tried to shame someone for their clothes was now known for his humility, his understanding, his dedication to helping others regardless of their status or appearance. The funny thing is, Tristan reflected, watching Tommy show other kids his John McClane action figure, "I thought first class was about status, about being better than others. Turns out it's about having the opportunity to help others when you can." Bruce nodded, understanding that some lessons can only be learned through living them. "True class," he said, "isn't about where you sit on the plane. It's about how you treat people when you think no one important is watching." The screening room had emptied except for their small group, but the energy of hope and possibility remained. Tommy's success story had become a beacon for other families facing similar battles, proving that sometimes the most important victories happen far from any movie screen. "You know what I learned?" Tristan asked the group. "Real heroes don't wear expensive suits or fly first class. They wear kindness, carry hope, and lift others up when they're falling." And there you have it, friends. A story that began with judgment and arrogance transformed into a mission of hope and healing. Have you ever had a moment of regret become a catalyst for positive change? Has someone's kindness in the face of your mistakes ever inspired you to be better? Share your stories in the comments below. Remember, true character isn't revealed by how we treat those we think are important, but by how we treat everyone before we know who they are. Sometimes the greatest acts of heroism happen not on movie screens, but in quiet moments when we choose kindness over judgment, understanding over arrogance, and hope over fear. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories about the moments that remind us that real life can be more meaningful than any movie, and that sometimes the most important journeys are the ones that change us from the inside out.